Welcome everybody to our 97th Learn Fast Aim Sports webinar series. This is, we started when the pandemic started back in March of 2020. We started to do these and 97 of them so far. That's yeah, very, very happy with that. We've provided a lot of training and a lot of great discussion about data and data topics in general. And this is the next one that we're going to do. This is the 23rd of 2021. This is the next one we're going to do. It's one of them that's in our driver coaching series. We've had several of the driver coaches on where we come in and talk about how we use the data, how we use data from the coaching standpoint. A lot of our folks that watch this may be hiring coaches, maybe looking at coaches, might be interested in becoming coaches. And it's and data is a big part of that. You have to have information. Obviously, you're watching the car, you're watching video, you're looking at data, all of the different things you do to coach. And I think it's such a valuable tool to have folks that come in and talk about just a little bit about their background and what they've done and all of that, which is kind of cool. And then to take the next step and show us, maybe just review a lap real quickly and take a look at how they use data, just some of their quick tips. It's certainly not in depth, but it gives you everybody here an idea of different ways of looking at things. So we have our guest today, and I'd like to welcome Sabre Cook. She's just a very impressive young driver in motorsports. We'll talk a little bit more about her. I met her the first time. I don't even know exactly when it was. I'm friends with her father, and out at Grand Junction, the racetrack. There's a kart track there in Grand Junction, Colorado, that the family has owned for a long time. And I went out there and gave a seminar, an AIM seminar, and then stayed the extra day, and was just helping anybody with that had Micron data as we were, just giving one-on-one help, and got to meet Sabre at that time and see her drive, and she was pretty darn quick. I don't remember if it was Junior 1 or just into Junior 2, but it was a while back. But she was very, very skilled at that point, and has gone on to just do wonderful things in motorsports. And again, as I say, just an impressive young lady. Here's a little bit about Sabre and some of the stuff that she's done. Just a very, very successful female racing driver, 8 times Colorado State karting champion. That's karting is, we do have a lot of karters here that follow us, but to win a state championship, once or twice is pretty impressive, and to win it 8 times is something else. But the next couple are even higher. 3 times Tag USA World Champion. That you're up against some strong competition. Super Karts USA SCUSA S2 national champion. When you get to that level, you got to be on top of your game to win a national championship in the SCUSA series. And that's just pretty impressive, the level of skill that she has. But she also goes into a bunch of more things that show how wide of a mastery she has of this process. The Infinity Engineering Academy, a winner in 2018 here in the United States, qualified and competed in the W series. Those are F3 cars. That it's a series of racing with women drivers. 2019, 2020. And now again in 2021, pretty impressive. And a mechanical engineering bachelor's degree from Colorado School of Mines. Thank you very much, Sabre, for joining us. Just a little bit about you. I'll have you maybe spend another 30 seconds or so at that uncomfortable position of having to tell us a little bit more about you. But I appreciate you being here. I thank you very much. It's a valuable service that you're providing with lots of folks that are going to watch this now live, and of course on YouTube in a while. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're at and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Sabre Cook, as Roger mentioned. Started in karting when I was young. My father, he raced motocross and supercross professionally, and obviously the parents didn't want us doing that, so we got into karting. And then I finally progressed into car racing in 2017, just due to lack of funding in order to make that transition from karting. As well as I went and got my undergraduate at Colorado School of Mines at the same time, graduated in 2017. And then obviously went on to go on into the W Series with F3 cars. I've done some stuff on the road to Indy, raced MX5 Cup race, Daytona this year. I've done some Porsche Cup stuff, and Pretty honestly, anything and everything that if I get a chance to race it, I will jump in. Never done any stock car stuff yet, so maybe we'll look at that down the road. But majority has been in open wheel and a little bit of sports car for me. I've been coaching for probably 11 years now. Since I was about 16 years old, I really started to try, branch out, take it very seriously as a job, and try and help other people grow as others have helped me. And I've worked with karters or young people in formula cars, or old guys or young guys, in anything and everything, whether that just be, the enthusiast or someone that's taking it seriously and trying to move up the motorsports ranks.
Pretty impressive. The credentials to become a good driving coach can be varied, right? And what I find that's pretty cool about what you do is, number one, you're super well spoken. You can explain everything very well, but the background of being a driver for a long time, and the engineering background of being able to understand data and understand the physics and some of the different things about it, I think makes that pretty impressive. You also have spent and do spend some time in Europe. After the Infinity Engineering Academy winner, I think you had some connections and you ended up spending a year over in Europe working with in the Formula One series. What did you do over there?
So after I won the Infinity Engineering Academy, I had a placement with Infinity as well as Renault F1. I worked in vehicle testing, and then I worked in suspension composite design. And then now I do some freelance engineering stuff as well, but I'm actually working mostly full-time at Formula Mazda, which is where I'm currently sitting in their sim room right now. So that's like the quick overview of what I've been doing engineering-wise the last couple of years.
Perfect. Let's get into the coaching methodology that you may use. Let's talk a little bit about that. Some of the same questions we've asked other coaches. Just kind of an interesting from the mental aspect of how you kind of handle this is, how do you prepare? You've got a client that you've chatted with on the phone, maybe on Zoom or some other product in that way. You've chatted a little bit. You've talked about it. How do you prepare as you're getting ready to head to the track in the next weekend? How do you prepare to work with a client? What is important that the client does? It's good for us, those of us that may be hiring a coach, hiring you in the future. What kind of things can we do? What in order to make this job more successful?
So first thing I'll do with a client is, when I get someone new that I haven't worked with previously, I just try to really get a gauge of who they are as a person and understanding how they learn best. Whether that maybe I'll have them go through some assessments, some skill assessments as well, just so I understand like how they process things, what they're going to learn from the best, and then maybe some of their skill areas that need developing. So start off there. And then depending on where we're going, obviously I'll do my own track prep, understanding the vehicle that we're going to be driving, exactly what, the nuances of wherever we're going to as a track, and whether it's a test or a race, and understanding exactly what the schedule is going to be, where we might have time for debrief, where we need to have our time set out to do warm-ups, where I can schedule in decompressive time for the driver, or if it's just, like more of a relaxed test day where you're just focusing on developing skills. And then I will try to create sort of like a packet that either for myself and for the driver to have some homework ahead of time, because at the end of the day, we only get a certain amount of time together. When you try to cram so much in, especially if you're at a race weekend or you're at a test day that's limited, you want to make sure that you use that time as efficiently as possible. So I will just make sure that we kind of do our homework ahead of time, so that way once we actually get into the day, we can make the most out of it.
There's nothing more valuable than at a track than time, right? And so all of that preparation makes the test day, the race, the coaching process be so much easier. And of course some folks are with us here today that maybe started and did not kart race before they got into their off-road or their drag racing or their sprint cars or their sports cars that of the drivers that we have watching today. They maybe they didn't do karting, and it's to me, data in karting is very, very difficult. From the data side, the coaching side, it's the same thing. It's because they come fast and furious, right? So you often will you'll have 2 or 3 sessions before qualifying, and they stack everything up really quickly, so you only have a few minutes in between. So not always can you even download the data, right? You're looking at different things, which brings me to the next question of data versus video. Data right on board the Micron 5 versus data in the computer. How do you use these tools when not to focus on the karting, but how do you use the tool? You've got data, you've got video. How do you decide what to use?
Well, I think the more information you have to understand the full picture of what's going on track, the better, the more. So obviously I will use whatever is available to me, but like you said, sometimes, we don't have time to in between sessions if it's a cram day, or maybe the video doesn't work, maybe the data doesn't work. All those things can vary. But in a perfect world, I would like to have video and data. And then obviously there's some opportunities depending on what software, but with AIM, you can put the video in as well next to the data. And so I like being able to look at the data for me myself to understand and make sure I have a good understanding of what exactly the driver is or is not doing. And then use, obviously, depending on the student and how they learn, and depending on their, a lot of times it is their age range. I will use the video more commonly to coach them, because I think they absorb more through looking at the video and seeing like physically what they need to be doing or what they are not doing correctly, versus like the data is great. Some drivers take to it very well, but a lot of drivers sometimes get more out of seeing like in-person driving, whether that be themselves driving or an onboard of me driving or onboard of someone else.
So a good chunk of the way that you handle this is that whole learning styles thing. You're watching the student that you're working with, either from the initial phone calls or some of the information you gather ahead of time, and then of course while you're at the track, what's the best way to get the information in? You're flexible as far as what they need, right? That's really part of your job too.
Yeah, I mean, and like, depending on, even the person will vary, like we only have a finite amount of focus as a human being during a day. So, especially with the kids, you can really tell when their focus starts to drift, and then you obviously got to change things up and bring out, I think we spoke about this previously, is creating a learning process that appeals to them, whether that be auditory, kinesthetic, or visual, physical, and doing whatever it takes in order to stimulate the things that is going to let them like attach to the information the most, so that way they can go and implement it when they go back out on the track.
Yeah, we had two decently long discussions about that very thing with James Colborn from England as a co-host here, where we talked about learning styles and some of the different ways. And if those of you that are watching now live, later on, go check out the YouTube page. Those of you watching this on YouTube, I'll try to link those down below. It's very, very interesting that just different ways of doing things and how that can really help open up the mind. The other thing on that focus is you've got a student, and and just your mindset, and maybe it varies per student, per client that you're going to be working with, but I call it the carrot and the stick. Where do you fall when it comes to, okay, we've got the driver, they've just went out there and they've done their 8 laps, and you've asked them to work on these 3 things, whatever it happens to be, and one of the corners they seem to have picked it up, and braking, they're still missing it. Are you do you tend to say, hey, you did a great job here, but here, or do you, hey, we got to focus on this, right? Kind of the stick before the carrot, right? How do you handle that discussion with different drivers?
I mean, overall, I think it's good to be positive and encouraging to continue to focus on the correct process, but obviously you get different personality types as we've discussed, and some people need more positive encouragement. They need more like, hey, like we still aren't there yet, but we're going in the right direction. And others need a bit more of uh, a tough love approach, especially if they're like, young drivers that maybe aren't realizing what a great opportunity they have in front of them, and they're not being as focused. And then you have to be a bit harsh or a bit strict with them. But it's always in like it's never in like a demeaning way. I think you should always motivate people through positive reinforcement, whereas it's like, we don't want to like tear them down, because that's creating a whole nother problem for yourself as a coach, where then you're affecting the psychology of it.
Yeah, it's tough discussion, but it's tough love, right? You're giving them that information in order to improve. And just I happen to agree with 100% with what the way that you approach that. And you almost that first couple of times you have to get the respect of the client, of the student. They understand that you do know what you're talking about, that kind of a thing, right? And then you can start to slip in, hey, right here, this is a problem area still. You need to focus on this, right? Let's follow this process. If you follow the process, this is going to work. You're going to improve. Perfect. The new drivers versus experienced drivers, as you go to a client, you find out that they're a brand new sports car racer or gentleman driver or whatever happens to be. This is their first year. Versus you're going to go work with somebody that has 7 or 8 years of karting experience and a couple years of sports cars, and they're trying to learn this new track and maybe working with the car. Experience versus new clients. So do you basically coach the same way, or do you adjust for that?
I mean, obviously the basics are always going to be there, right? There's the foundation is always going to be the same. So when you have a newbie come in, your dedication of the coaching time ends up being really just focusing on those basics and making sure that they don't have any bad habits. If they do, removing those and just making sure that their skills and the way that they're going about driving as a whole, you really want to just break that down and approach that, versus someone that has a lot of experience and is like very well versed. You can obviously talk about things in a more in-depth level, or you get to a certain level of driving and then you could discuss certain things that, like, when you're right at the limit, when you're within that last half second, then it kind of opens it up to talking about those little minute details and being able to have those sort of more in-depth conversations. And then also when you get students like that, it's also trusting them to bounce ideas off you as well, like listening to what they're saying more. And like, obviously with a less experienced driver, then you're kind of teaching them what it's supposed to feel like but when you have a experienced driver, then you're like you're also making sure they remember the basics, but you're also listening to their inputs a little more and then trusting there, and then almost like adapting the process together.
Interesting that it's the psychology thing still, right? And their level of expertise, but you do basically teach the same basic fundamentals, right? The driving line is the driving line. You don't change that for a student early in their career versus somebody that has a lot of experience. The couple of questions came in, and they're going to fit right into this time, which is probably why they asked them, right? Kyle asked the question, I am very interested in your take on coaching women versus men. We'll go through the rest of it. Do you find there are gender-based differences or techniques?
No.
Perfect.
There is, I can think of 2 examples right off the top of my head of, I have a female that is, more soft-spoken. She is more meek. I have to push her to be aggressive. And then I have another that is just gung-ho, and I got to rein her back in. So, they're both females, and they do things. Their driving styles are completely different.
It's interesting. There may be differences in the genders, but if they have chosen to come into this sport, that it's generally a mental type that is already here, right? It would be my guess. What do I know? Bruce asks a question. What do you think is the bigger challenge? This probably was a question I should have asked everybody, because it is a question that I kind of I enjoy. What is the bigger challenge? A driver that overdrives catches it, and one that doesn't drive to the vehicle's potential? Is it easier to make somebody go faster? Or is it easier to slow them down a little bit to get that speed? You've no doubt ran into both of those challenges. What do you think about that question?
100% is always easier to bring the driver back down to speed. It's better if they tend to have almost too much confidence and they're overdriving and they have that speed, because then you can be like, okay, let's just step it down, because you're obviously can already go this fast. So now let's just bring it back in, versus a driver that's maybe not confident, not comfortable. And, you really gotta, then it becomes a long stepping process to build their confidence and build their sort of adapt and trust in the vehicle and in themselves. So it's definitely easier to have one that is overzealous.
Yeah, if this is the line, right, and if they're willing to come up to the line, then all of a sudden you can go into technique. But if it takes you 4 or 5 sessions to get them to run up there, that becomes a longer process, right? You have to get through that before you can jump into the other part. So that makes good sense. Let's talk back to technique for a second. What is the first thing you look into? I'm going to go ahead and move up to having a data file up here in front of us. I'm not going to dig into it quite yet. We'll have one more quick question. In generalities, what's the first thing you look into? If you're sitting there and you've chatted with the driver, you've went out, they've made the session, you're going to come back in. You have these top 3 things, let's say, that you begin to look into, or just the one over the bigger picture goal. What's important? We have braking, we have corner entry, we have where will you focus to make sure that the driver can take that next step?
I guess if I'm working with a driver and it's in the middle of a day where we're working on certain things, the first thing, well, other than obviously checking to make sure there's nothing like blatantly, absolutely out of the ballpark, then I will look at the areas that we talked about before the session, because those are the focus. Those are the 3 main things that we really should have been putting our mental energy towards. So I want to make sure that, 1, I'm connecting with them and they're understanding what I want them to do, and 2, that they're actively trying to make those changes. So I'll look at those areas first, see it like lap to lap. I'll check a few laps back to back to back to see if they've been experimenting, see if they've tried to apply the changes. But then always I will look at the brake shapes, which is, I think, one of the most important things, and ensuring that the entries are correct, because if you don't start the right way, there's not like this magic dust that's going to all of a sudden make you figure it out and go fast on the exit.
If you don't get that first third right, the other 2/3 are probably going to be wrong, right? So we always push back to, if you see a problem, always go the previous 2 or 3 seconds of data, and you're probably going to figure out what went sideways, right? So so entry and the beginning of the corner is probably where your eyes will go maybe a little bit quicker, and then follow the process through. So interesting. Another question or 2 before we go and start digging into the data itself. What do you think the biggest impediments to a woman getting to the top of the road racing world, more sports cars, road racing, open wheel, that kind of thing, is a question from David Arkin, an open wheel guy.
I think that it is hard to make it as a racing driver, period, regardless of gender. I obviously, less women start, therefore less women finish. There is obviously unique situations where we do get discriminated against, and sometimes sponsors don't take us as seriously, or they don't see us as a safe investment as a male driver. So those obviously make it hard. But I think that the big first step would be, getting those women that are in the high positions in the major companies that have the marketing dollars, that have those budgets, that can invest in sports, to invest in women athletes.
Being a race car driver is not just going fast, is it? It hasn't been for a long time. It's really a bigger picture thing. And the other big coaching question here is that it's just a deep philosophical discussion. Do you prefer looking at the data as we're looking at it here with the video, or do you prefer riding in that passenger seat and going out for a ride or have them ride with you and then swap and do some coaching that direction? What is your thought about riding with clients?
I think that if it's a safe environment and it is then there's no problem riding with a client. But obviously there's always that risk as a coach that you have to consider. So I know a lot of people actually will, they no longer will do ride-alongs because of the risk. I think that they each have their own place, right? So we can look at the data. I can look and see exactly what you've done in the session, and we can probably figure out what was wrong during the session. So I don't necessarily think I have to be sitting right next to you in order to tell that. But I think there is a time and place, especially when you have new drivers or people that are developing, where maybe they don't know in the moment what they're doing incorrectly. So that's where riding along with someone and then catching their attention and being like, whoa, whoa, do you know why that just happened? And then explaining it to them makes them grasp that sort of what it's supposed to feel like sooner, rather than going over the data and then getting them to try and get what you want them to do, or having them ride with you. Then you can show, okay, this is how it felt when you did it. Now this is how it feels when I do it. Because I think there's something that, like, I mean, I've had it as a racing driver where I try this new technique and I try it and I try it and I try it. And then finally I do it right and it just clicks. And then all of a sudden that feeling, you like bank that feeling, right? Like that becomes like your golden piece. So if you can create that moment for someone sooner rather than later, I mean, their progression is definitely going to go up. It's just a matter of whether that option is available.
And a big part of that is that learning styles again, right? You know, somebody can look at a squiggly line for a long time, and if they don't feel it, they just video will get you halfway there. But boy, feeling it, if I would be okay with if I was to go back 30 or 40 years back and was a younger man, I would I think I would drive the client's car and have them ride along. But I am to the point now. It scared me to death to go ride on some of the tracks. I mean, if it's a low speed track and you know and got a safe car, and the driver has shown that you know that they're going to keep this under control, that's one thing. But I remember a story that I was told one time at dinner with it was from Ed Zabinski, and he was coaching with I think it was a Ferrari challenge car. This is Ferrari challenge data we're looking at here, but I think it was a Ferrari challenge car or a late model Corvette. I don't remember which, but he was riding in the right seat at Daytona, and the driver did nothing wrong, but blew a tire just before turn one, just past the start finish line in the tri-oval at Daytona at 100 and whatever, right, 160 miles an hour or something. It was a fast car, and they were just along for the ride, and that nobody did anything wrong, but there he was spinning helplessly through the grass heading towards the pit wall, and luckily got it stopped on pit lane before they hit anything. So those are things that would just that make me a little nervous. So
yeah, understandable.
But to each his own, right? It's that comfort level of what you'd like. The one last one before we jump into data. Antonio has a question. What is the main difference? I mean, you and I actually chatted about this a little bit yesterday. And what is the main difference between a data engineer and coaching a driver? They're very related in my opinion, but what do you see the difference between those two hat-wearing positions?
I guess a lot of it is the human element, right? So the data engineer is supposed to look at things very objectively. They're supposed to check for a lot of any faults, issues with the car, or obviously they could look at what the driver is doing, whether they're inducing what's going on with the car, but they're sort of looking at things from a very data-driven, objective perspective. Being a coach, your job is essentially to create this great environment, physically and mentally, to get the best out of the driver. So like your job isn't like the engineers taking care of, most of the car is their main thing. Yes, they work with the driver, but as a coach, your little baby is the driver itself, right? And so your job is to obviously interpret what's going on with the data as well, and then understand how to extract the most from the driver. And maybe the engineers to understand the data and learn how to extract the most from the car. So it's like human engineering.
Yeah, yeah, and yet there is the overlap in
Mhm.
those two, right? So it's an interesting thing. I don't consider myself a driver coach at all, but sometimes I'll be looking at data and you can see where the driver's done something, and you certainly can share that with a driver and help them see it and understand it. But that driver coaching is so much more in depth than that to do it correctly. So perfect. Okay, let me kind of set up this data file a little bit, and Sabre's going to walk us through maybe a lap. Maybe we'll go wherever we wish to go. Those of you that are watching with us, maybe you can throw some questions out about the data. This is some data that Ray Phillips has used in previous webinars with us, and it's Ferrari Challenge 488 Ferrari Challenge car, and it's Laguna Seca. And the WeatherTech Speedway, I guess, is how they would want you to call it now, right?
Yeah.
But the data is just some generic channels that we've got up here. We're just going to touch on the surface of kind of some of the stuff that you might look for. What we've got here is in the upper window, we've got a speed trace, kind of our way of looking at things. We almost always have a speed trace up here. We've got engine RPM. We've got overlaid on top of each other the feet, right, or the throttle pedal and the brake pressure on top of each other here in the third window. And then we've got a steering angle and we've got gear position. So we've got these basic driver inputs, because you're in this particular case, we're coaching the driver, and we're just going to kind of walk through this lap real briefly and have you give us an idea of what you kind of look for. The other thing that is set up here is we do have a GPS map, so we know where we're at, and it is colorized with brake pressure. So that's gives you kind of a layout of the land here. So we're here near the start finish line. We're heading down into turn 1 and turn 2. Let's just kind of walk through what you might look at first, and then maybe I'll run the mouse and you give me an idea of where you'd like to go look, and we'll zoom in occasionally, take a look at some stuff. But what would be important? What would be the first thing that you might check out into this data file?
Well, I would look at the speed traces first and just look at the general trends of it. So there's a strange drop off on the straightaway, which I guess maybe a little bit of it happens before the steering input really though. So that's I'm not sure what that is. And then sorry, go ahead.
It is around the shift, so not sure if
Yeah,
the
but
driver's
he's
flat
not
to the floor. So
lifting.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, you are right.
So
Boy, that's something that does jump out at you. But the driver is floored, so we can't. Since we're talking driver stuff,
yeah.
okay. But your eyes found it, and you thought about it. You processed
Well,
it.
it could mean like he does. I mean, he is turning because it's obviously arced. So I mean, maybe he's taking the wrong line on the straight. Maybe he's just having too much input, and that's why he gets the speed drop. But
Okay.
that's not one of the big ones I see, I guess. So then, like going into turn 1, the deceleration speed, I feel like it could be a bit sharper. And then obviously, if you look at the trend on the min speeds on most of the corners, there's like this drop, and then it's kind of like goes plateaus, and then it goes down again. So
real
typically
big on this corner, right?
yeah.
Is what you're showing. You see it other places as well, but real big on this one here. Okay.
So for me, that just shows that they're not comfortable with maximizing the car on the entry. They're usually probably they're braking too early, then they're realizing they're entering too slow, and then they, either release too soon or they try to get to throttle, and then that's when they get the plateau back, and then they end up actually having their minimum speed possibly too late in the corner because they've tried to make up for braking too early, and now they've ruined sort of their transition period, and now they can't get to throttle when they want
to actually show that in the data for you, as you mentioned it, I put the cursor right to the min speed, V-min, as some people would call it, and then we can look at the GPS driven line in the middle of that corner is gosh, what, 30, 40, 50 feet earlier of where the min speed actually is, and it's because of the stuff that you mentioned, but it shows up pretty clearly. If we go to another corner, there's that one, and if we pull that over a little bit, the bulk of the corner has been handled, right, and just start to scroll up on the speed, and it's maybe a little farther around the corner than what it maybe needs to be. Okay.
And then the other, after looking at the speed trace, obviously the big things I would look at would be the braking and the throttle applications. There's obviously the big overlap of brake and throttle, which is a very big no-no. And that's a pretty big trend throughout the lap. So we would definitely want to fix that problem first. And then the braking shapes would be another one of my concerns. It looks like, their delivery of pressure and on most initial hits isn't as peaky, like as instantaneous as it could be. There's a little bit of a buildup. And then on a lot of them, they've got like this strange bleed off, or the bleed off isn't correct because they've obviously broken too early, they release quickly, and then they're like, oh wait, I actually have understeer, so I need a little more brake. Am I going to make the apex? And then they're like, oh, I am too slow, and then they try to get to throttle much too soon, as well as still braking. So they're asking the car to do a lot of different things and in a lot of different directions. So I feel bad for these tires at the moment.
Yeah. Let's zoom in on that this particular turn. I guess it's turn 2 at Laguna. The way that they number them has the two of the main things you just talked about it built in. And I just want to, for the folks that are watching, let's look at these traces with just a little bit more clarity, with zooming in a little bit. Number one, you talked about being on both pedals at the same time. Once you do that, you're applying torque to the rear tires is being applied, and yet you're standing on the brakes, which is proportionately large on the front tires, and you're asking it to probably turn at the same time.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden, with both pedals being applied, and this is the perfect example of that, and right here is another example of that, you're probably just going to run the front tire, the outside front tire off it especially, right? So there's that, what you talked about. And then the other one is right here in the yellow trace, the brake pressure trace. The driver hits the brakes, the braking is coming down, the speed is coming down, and then there's this plateau where the driver has either looked at the corner, eyes up, looks over at the apex and goes, I'm going to stop before the apex, right? or be slow. And then so the driver's waited for a while and then hits dropped off a lot, and then waited for a while and then released the brakes the rest of the way. Is that what you're seeing there as well, now that we've zoomed in just a little bit on that?
Yeah, that's I would definitely, maybe just for this driver, their first job, I guess the next session, if we were to go out again, is no double pedal. Like one, you only get to choose one at a time. And then would definitely be focusing on just picking a consistent point, committing to that initial hard peak pressure, and then working on that, that brake bleed off, because that's probably that's probably what's making him uncomfortable. And it looks like, if I had to guess, I mean, he's very inconsistent, and he's asking the car to do a lot in the corner. So he's thinking maybe he's at the limit, but he's not, because it feels crazy and uncomfortable, but it's really just because of the inputs that you're giving.
You're creating you as a driver are creating some of this drama. And if we get back to your earlier statement, let's go back to the first part of the corner, right? Let's work on that, and the rest of it will begin to flow. And I think you and I maybe chatted about it a little bit, but the other thing is, if this is a trend, and let's back out a little bit, and there's another corner here that the driver is doing a very similar thing, right? If you find that that's a trend, are you willing to coach the student or the client to the point where saying, hey, let's just give up on we're not watching lap times at this point. We're going to go back out in this session, and I want you to focus 100% on doing this segment of these braking zones correct, and let's get those right, and let's not worry about lap times, and let's not worry about speed and some of the other things. Is that an approach that you would take?
Absolutely. I've taped many of microns so they cannot see what their lap times are. So
yeah, take that carrot away from them, right? A little bit. Let's focus on
exactly.
what we need to do to get the basics built correctly, the foundation, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect. So then we've kind of studied a little bit, and we could study every corner, but the basics of braking, getting it correct, coming off one pedal at a time, we've done that. So what's kind of the next thing you see in this data? And I'll zoom into it. It's when you point something out, but where would we look? What do you see next?
I mean, other than the big trends that we already talked about with the overlapping and if you look at, there's several of them, but I guess the one I'm looking at is like just after 6,000 feet, that brake shape.
Okay.
So for me, that where on the map is that turn 6?
That's
So turn 6 is like there is definitely going to be it's a short, hard brake, just enough to set the nose, get the car to turn in, and then try to balance over obviously all those transitions in elevation. But for me, well, other than the pedal overlap again, the brake trace, because it's quite round, is not, it shows me that they could just probably brake later and hit that instantaneous pressure and then come off of it. So like almost if you were to cut that first section of the brake zone, you get to wherever the peak is, basically whatever's left of that peak, just get rid of it.
Come down faster at that particular point, because you're really just trying to set the nose and get the thing. You're not really pulling a ton of speed out of it, right? You're the physics of moving the car up to the front.
Yeah, and then he obviously is overslowed because he tries to get to throttle too soon. So if you take that first bit of braking out, then you would assume that now he would be more comfortable with, okay, he's obviously finished braking and he wants to go right back to throttle. But now that he's kind of taken away that bit of braking, now it is maybe more in line with being towards the limit. Now he can go to throttle.
And the two that were right here, this braking zone and the next braking zone, both show that trend. And I haven't, this one certainly doesn't, but it's showing the trend that he tried to get to throttle, had to roll back out, wait, and even when he finally did get to full throttle, it was not with command, right? It was not. He's a little bit concerned. Same thing over here. He's just a little short piece before entering in the middle of the carousel. Very, very tentative on the throttle.
Like if we actually look at, if we stop looking at the entries of the corner and we look at now the exits, all the throttle applications are quite like progressive. So like I understand that maybe you have like a tip-in point with the throttle and you're just like testing the grip and then you need to commit back to full, but there's, this drags on for quite a long time, and it takes him a long time to get to full throttle. So for me, like on this one that's in the middle, that's by the 5,000 mark, this turn 5, I mean, he takes more time to get to full power than it took him to do all of his braking.
Yeah, here's just a function for those of you that are watching that now that Sabre mentions that, let's use the delta function. We'll come down here. I click on it and I'm going to go right here to when brakes were released down to 0. I'm going to click there to begin. And then we're going to bring this up and go right to where the driver has ended up at full throttle. The delta function just being as soon as I make that function active, I have to set an anchor point and a measure point, which now I've done the 2 clicks. And up here in the upper right corner shows that it's 5.65 seconds from where the driver was off the brakes till the driver achieved full throttle. That is 586 feet. That making the point of visually, we very, very clearly could, but maybe throwing out a number for a driver might even make that point even clearer, right? Yeah. Perfect. And even in this next one where it's a little bit quicker, let's zoom in just a little bit more, make it easier on me to be precise. So we'll come here to where the brakes were off and up here to where the driver gets to full throttle. That was 3.1 seconds and it looked a whole lot better than the previous one, right? And that's still a long time to be transitioning up. He's scared of the car. It's the car's not ready. It's because of something he did in the first part of the car, whatever happens to be, right? That's where you're much better at that. But I certainly can see the number, right? So perfect. Let's jump back out to full width. We've been talking about brake and throttle. There is you talked about the driver has created a situation maybe by using both feet or trying to roll through the corner, maybe the exit a little bit faster. So what is some of the stuff you might look at to even understand that a little bit better? Just where does steering angle come into your coaching model and some of the stuff that you're looking at? Is it another channel that you look at all the time, or is it just to understand what the balance is and try to get even more information about what the driver's feeling, or how do you handle that?
No, I'll definitely take a look at it and see what their sort of input trends are. So like in the slow corners, are they like, having enough input at the right amount of brake pressure, taking advantage of if the car has downforce, using that, you maximizing that on the entry, or then looking at like high speed corners, are they trying, are their hands smooth, or looking at it from a balance perspective, like, maybe if this guy has a big lift and he's obviously uncomfortable, then I'm going to look and see, is the balance of the car oversteer? Or is it, he goes into the corner and he's obviously maybe like he's not broken late enough, and then he tries to get off the brakes too early, and then he gets understeer, and then he just maybe if he adds more and more and more wheel, and then you see the terminal understeer, then you can see, well, was that driver induced, or was that because the car is actually understeering?
We have a saying here that we use all the time, and it's what happened, where did it happen, and why did it happen? And the way that you just described that fits right into our little talk, right? It's what happened, you're slower, faster, whatever the situation is, and where was it, mid corner, braking, or whatever happens to be. But the one big question always is why, and you went right there by being able to look maybe at some of these other inputs and understand the why behind what some of the stuff that we're seeing. I look at this steering trace really quickly, and just from the 10,000 foot level, and this one here, I'll take the line off it, but right there is it is one of the things that jumped out at me, right? So you've got steering inputs. There's the little kink, in the front straightaway. So there's a little, 23 degrees of steering wheel input. You released it a little bit while he was braking, right? Is what you mentioned, what you would be looking at. And that was a perfect example of that. Then starts the downshift process through the corner. And then right here, as the driver is applying brakes, and if we zoom in just a little bit more, you see this steering wheel returning back towards zero. The driver's starting to turn into the right. We've got 22 degrees of angle, and then all of a sudden the driver is back to virtually 3 degrees more near pointing straight ahead with the steering wheel. But the turn has started to happen, and that started, okay, we got a little bit of an oversteer on the way in. It didn't start right when they hit the brakes or release the throttle, but it's as the braking was just peaking, the car got a little bit loose on entry. Other than that, I don't see a ton of quick hands going the opposite direction, that kind of stuff. I see what could be. We'd have to dig in deeper, maybe some understeering moments, but boy, that's the only one of the oversteer side. So certainly not a bunch of over braking, right? For the most part. What are your thoughts of kind of studying through that steering trace and seeing something you might see?
Like you said, we can dig in and we can see like there might be little transitions where there is oversteer, or maybe like in turn one, he needs to really get his hands straighter before, quite a bit before that brake zone. But with this driver specifically, I would say just overall looking at the steering trace, the car doesn't have a crazy massive understeer or oversteer balance. So for me, I would leave the car the same and just focus on fixing the techniques.
Perfect. And you do see some areas of improvement with the driver's feet, but the driver's hands, to restate this, but the driver's hands don't appear to be the cause. It's more the driving their way around, but the feet seem to be the problem. So okay, perfect. Got a couple more questions in here. We'll fit in. We've got only 3 or 4 minutes, 4 or 5, and let's chat about a couple more questions, and then we'll kind of start winding this up. David asked, my recent experience with younger drivers is their discomfort with any instability of the car. This is a question that David has more or less asked in the past, and it's always an interesting one. The drivers that maybe they're coming out of karting where they've just got a ton of grip, right? And for when a car gets unstable, you'll see some drivers that not being able to use that to their advantage to maybe rotate the car, set some different things. Is this something you notice in your coaching, and if so, how do you help overcome that discomfort, feel comfortable with a car that's a little bit free?
Definitely. Me being one of those young kids that transitioned to karting and was uncomfortable with that. So I like a very general overview in order to improve that is just learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And it's just about like doing specific drills that is going to build that confidence and those skills.
I also have the opinion here. I also happen to think that when you come from karting, and I never say move up, but you transition into cars because that's something you might want to do. Now all of a sudden you've got tires with bigger sidewalls, you've got suspension. There is this whole other dynamic of roll and some other things that also, it's these drivers that are coming out of karts are so incredibly talented, but yet they're thrown into something where the car totally is feeling something they've never felt in the past, which I think that is what some of it creates that problem.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on, and I mean, with a cart, it's easy for you to catch the slide, so you think you feel comfortable with that. There's so many more steps that your butt now has to feel in order to understand when you need to be doing the correct steps and inputs in order to react to that.
It really is a learning process. You just don't transition from one type of car, in this case, karts to cars, or even different cars, an open wheel, Formula Mazda to an IMSA car, right? There is a different feel that you just have to figure out without crashing the car, obviously, right? So Tice has an interesting question, and this is more from your driving career, I suppose, but with the knowledge you have, engineering, all of the different things, all the experience you have, do you have a problem that you're almost never happy with your driving and data when you race yourself? That we have a lot of drivers that just never can please themselves, let alone the people that they're working with. What's your thought of that?
I have to agree with that. Definitely. Well, yeah, I do agree with it partially, but there's also another part of me that is working on, self-development and focusing on creating the right goals, and then focusing on achieving those process-based goals. And if I achieve those process-based goals, then it's a good day. But then you have to give yourself credit and be proud of the performance that you gave. But obviously there's always something that you could do better. No one is a robot. And even Lewis Hamilton, I'm sure, has, well, we've seen he has mistakes as well. And it's just about understanding and accepting, yes, there is this perfection out there, but us as humans maybe never will achieve that. But it's all about the process of getting there.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? Between beating yourself up over finding the 10th here and that 100th there, and knowing that you could have got that just a little bit better versus learning from it and applying it as best you can in the next session. It's a fine line, and I think most people that are driven are always looking for that self-improvement, whether it's in their driving or anything in their life. I have not mentioned this as well in our 4 coaching sessions that we've done, but probably should have early on. But coaching is such an important thing that you've got a Lewis Hamilton or you talk about any of the Castro Neves or any of these people that you might see. These are top of the line professional drivers that are at the top of their field, and they've got driver coaches. They've got people that work with them. They're looking at data, they're looking at video, and they're digging in. Or you hear them on the radio if you're listening to the radio, and they're talking about, hey, they gain 2/10 on you in this segment or in this braking zone, and boom, they immediately go to work on it. So it's driver coaching. It's not something that is just out there, and it's something that you might want to do if you're going to get very good at this. This is very much a shortcut to learning what to work on, right? It's most of us can probably get there, but it takes, what you're really paying a coach for is their experience and understanding where to get you to work to get the greatest benefit for the time you spend out there. So that's pretty
exactly. Let me give you the knowledge that I've spent years and many dollars learning in a day.
Yeah, that hourly rate is very cheap when you look at it that way, right? The amount of information that you can share and help them cut that learning, that time out of the learning curve is very important. Sabre, do you seek out coaching to get other points of view and technique? The point being, hey, you're working with somebody, you see something, and all of a sudden you sit back, and you go, wow, look at that. I think I'm going to kind of fold that into something I do and try that in the future. Is that something that's happened to you?
Absolutely. I think that what is the quote? If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself. So when you coach people and when you get to analyze what they're doing, many times you'll have aha moments, be like, I was doing that same thing. Why didn't I think about that? And just like little trends, or even if it's like, because you have to go back to the basics, right? You're always going back to the basics to making sure that they're doing their skills correctly. So then it kind of always gives you that reminder to always come back to those skills, those basics, and make sure that you're approaching things in the correct way.
To take 10 seconds to say it, I teach data analysis with these AIM products. There isn't been a single time, I do not believe, that I haven't had to, when I'm preparing to do one of these webinars or a seminar in site or a technical support question that comes in, that I don't learn something based on what I am trying to explain, because it's the statement you said, I don't have it top of my head, but in order to explain it, you have to know it, you have to learn it, and we're never all there, right? So I learned so much by being an instructor of this kind of thing. It's just amazing how much I have learned because of that side of it. And the other side of sharing data, right? You've no doubt been on multiple car teams. You might be the fastest person on the team in a certain segment, and or by lap time, and yet there is the slowest guy and the next person slower, always is faster somewhere, and there's always something to learn. It never fails. So a couple more questions as we kind of finish up here. Art asked, do you ever feel that drivers back off because they are not comfortable with the increase in G loads? My guess is that would be more of a new student. They just throw that thing in there and they're just not expecting the car would ever take that. Do you find that overcoming that feeling of speed or force is something you've had to work with drivers on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's human nature to do something that there's an action and then there's a reaction that makes you uncomfortable, and there's that self-preservation that's like, oh, okay, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And so it's easier to get certain drivers to overcome this than others, but it is definitely a normal thing that you have to go through.
Absolutely, it's just part of the learning curve, right? A couple more before we call it a day. John asked, does coaching include how to learn a new track? Have you found that when you jump in there, that corner is similar to this corner you've already ran at a different track, or he uses the turn 1 at Thunder Hill, similar to turn 1 at X, right? Or is turn 5 the same at turn 4? Learning new tracks, is that a skill that you clearly have learned? You're a race car driver and you travel around and do these things. Does that transfer, or you try to transfer that, or do you focus on that track only and just get them faster there?
No, I think it's kind of like that. You teach a man to fish, you could feed him for a lifetime, or you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. So
yeah, there you go.
Your job as a coach is to, not only, obviously be there to help them get through it, but ultimately what you're trying to create is a driver that is independent and can evaluate themselves through the tools that you help them develop. So when you go to wherever you're working out with a driver, you want to I always go over first thing in the day. We always go over, like, we walk the track and we learn how to look for certain things at that specific track. And then, that's your bread and butter as a racing driver, because nothing is ever going to be the same. Nothing is ever going to be consistent, where, you're on all these different tracks and all these different cars. So learning how to adapt is one of the most precious gifts that you can give your student.
A very, very dynamic situation, right? It's one thing to go out and go decently fast by yourself, and then those darn other cars are in the way and trying to go faster than you and take your spots. And we've got some really great questions. We're going to have to kind of wind it up here. There was one here that I thought Tice asked the question. Right here, you see as the driver's coming off of this corner, about the 3,000 foot range, you see the steering start to have some noise in it on the way out. There's a couple things that can do that. Number one, it can be the driver is right there at the edge, right? And we could bring up lateral G's and see if the car has oversteer or is on the edge, or there could be rumble strips, and that can actually get to a speed sensor occasionally. But good eye, when I see that, if I seen a speed trace that was perfectly smooth everywhere, it's a good hint also that the driver's not pushing the limit as well, right? If the driver doesn't have to make those subtle catches. So
that's the exit of turn 3, right?
That is, yep, that is the exit of turn 3.
There's curbing there that
huge rumble strips.
You drive onto, so that's probably what that is.
A good driver's knowledge of knowing the track on top of it. Perfect. The Marcia is a gal here that's been with us for a while as well. You already kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I'll let her have the closing question before we kind of move on and start to close it up. How do we get more women in racing, not just from the driving standpoint, but from data and mechanics and other things? Is there anything that that you would want to add to that question?
Yeah, I think that creating, I guess, an environment or having a perspective that allows women to feel more comfortable to enter into motorsport, because I mean, I think it can be quite intimidating for a lot of women if they don't have ties into motorsports. It's intimidating for people in general to be able to, it's a stigma. They're always asking, how do I get into motorsports? And then if you're as a woman, then you want to try to get in and you realize there's really not a lot of women like you in it, then it's even more intimidating. And I, like, obviously growing up, I was completely oblivious to how blessed I was with my father and my mother just encouraging me to do whatever I wanted to do, regardless that I was a boy or a girl. So I think that part of it really starts kind of at home. And if you want to, if you have a young girl, just encourage her to do what she wants to do. Like, don't limit her, maybe because maybe her brother wants to race, but maybe she wants to race too, and maybe she's just not as outspoken about it. So just, having that open perspective, as well as, like, for those of you that are in teams, or for those of you that are in, higher up, like manager positions or CEOs in companies, just understanding that, you didn't get, as a woman especially, you didn't get there by yourself. So now it's, it's our turn to in turn help those get to where we were, but much faster and much more of us. So I think it just starts on all of us kind of banding together and then making it a very open environment. And then, like I mentioned before, those big companies, they have to invest in women athletes, period. Not just, I'm not saying just drivers, but women athletes, period, are underpaid.
Yeah. As a grandfather now of a 2-year-old daughter, maybe I'm a little bit more susceptible to seeing some of this. I think it comes with age as well, right? You just learn more about the world and about life, and I just think it's spectacular. Motorsports, especially from the driving side, is you're driving a car. You're not having to carry it around, right? There is no reason why. And in fact, there's lots of probably pretty good reasons why women can be or should be even better drivers. We chatted with a psychologist, Matt Romanowski. I can't remember the doctor's name now, but he a big part of his study was the female versus male drivers and some of the strengths and the weaknesses of both. It was an interesting discussion. We didn't get we actually happened upon that only about 15 minutes ago, so we didn't get to study it deeply, and it was a pretty interesting topic. So
I will have to look into that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to invite him back because he opened up. It was all started out with the physics, the physiological part, right? Heart rates and all of that. But then we quickly transitioned into some mental things and how to understand drivers better and how drivers are seeing things and Michigan University, there's some interesting things, deeper subjects than what we may have thought of in the past. Kind of interesting stuff. So I'll include that link into the description box below for those of you that are watching it in later on YouTube as well. So I appreciate you being here. It's been a great time. I enjoyed it. Let's jump out to here. And kind of close this up a little bit. I appreciate all the questions. There's even a couple more that I think are intriguing questions. We just didn't have the time. We will take a look at all the questions that were asked. We'll be putting those into a document and putting a link to that, including the ones that didn't get answered. Well, I'll see if I can get Sabre to answer those fairly quickly, maybe in writing. Just a couple I think we didn't cover. And we'll add those as a link down into the bottom in the coming weeks. So as soon as we're finished here, I will go to work and get this placed up onto YouTube. We currently have 162 videos there, and every one of these that we do goes up there as fast as we can, and just tons of great information to look back on and learn from. It's pretty good stuff. Customer support company, that's what we do. We had we had people all over the country last weekend, over the weekend, supporting our racers all over North America. If you don't see us there, you can't get any questions or answers at that point, give us a call at the 800 number shown there. Love to have you learn a little bit more and help you support you and to get even more out of the investment that you put together. So next webinar is one I've been looking forward to. We're going to talk racing and racing data with PJ Jones. PJ Jones is a longtime racer, has raced at high levels, IndyCar, been in a couple of Indy 500s. Dr. David Ferguson, good, thank you very much in the chat, Tice. And he put the link there for everybody if you want to watch that. PJ is the son of Parnelli Jones. He's raced at Indy cars for Dan Gurney. He's raced, and I think even AJ Foyt. He when I really started to notice him was when he was racing the Toyota GTP car in IMSA back in the day. Just a beast of cars and super fast, factory backed, over 1,000 horsepower in qualifying. I think 4 cylinders. I mean, they were just going at it. They were the top-notch cars, fastest cars, and still including PJ still, I believe, owns the track record at Lime Rock and maybe even Laguna, the overall track record with that car way back in that day. So PJ is going to come and chat with us. He's preparing today, heading down, I think, tomorrow for the Baja 500, where he's going to be racing a company that he has. He has a UTV performance shop where they prep UTVs, and he's going to be racing in the Baja 500 this coming weekend. So we'll have him come in. We'll talk about racing pre-data, and then as data kind of comes in, we'll talk with him about AIM products in the UTV market and some of the data that he looks at there and helps his customers and helps himself with racing. It'll just be a great thing to chat with him and in his racing motorsports experience. So having him here next week, that will be a good time. The contact information for Sabre is down here on our contact page. I really appreciate you being here. It's been a great conversation. I wish we could have went longer. I just we did go a little late. I shared that we might do that with you because this is an interesting topic to me. But I appreciate you being here. Is there anything else you'd like to add as we kind of close this one down?
No, just to thank you, and it's great speaking to you guys and answering all of your questions. And if anybody ever needs the coaching or has any more questions, just feel free to reach out to me.
There you go. We've got your social media accounts down there and an email address for anybody that wants to get a hold of her. She's again a very interesting young lady, very accomplished and very smart. So I appreciate you coming on. Tell your dad hi for me. I've chatted with him a couple times on Facebook back and forth, and I know he's awful proud of you. And
well, he was supposed to watch today, but I haven't seen him in the chat yet. So.
He might be, and he's your typical dad, right? He's just not going to comment until later, right? So, but I appreciate you coming. It's been very good. Maybe even get you back on at some point in the future if we have a topic that we'd like to focus even a little bit more on than just the basic coaching stuff that we talked about today. We might give you a call back and ask you to join us again. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody being here. Look forward to seeing everybody in a week next Tuesday for PJ Jones. Talk to you guys soon.